here to, sorry, they're both Mike. Mike is Mike now. Mike and Amber is going to sort of summarize for us a number of ideas that we heard during the day. And we did move from that initial presentation by Nick out in the vineyard all the way out on Pine. But before we hear that summary, I have asked Mike Creer, Creer Egg Farm, to share sort of a surprise announcement with us. It's one that Mike and I have talked about over the last several months. It's emerged from multiple sources here at Cornell, but the idea originated outside of the academy. The idea originated with our industry partners. And so I really see this as a coming together to face the future, okay, and to do a better job in the future in terms of thinking about systems and what is the system and how do you manage in a complex food system that we're going to face more and more in the future. So if you feel ready, I give the podium over to Mike Creer, who's going to share his thoughts with us.
Thank you. Today's presentations have demonstrated the collaborative power that happens when academia, public institutions, and private industry work together. To properly address the challenges that lie ahead, each partner must work effectively with the others. If this collaboration to address complex issues is the shared vision of the future that we hold, then we must train our undergraduates, our future leaders, to think in this manner, at this level of cooperation, this understanding that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. To that end, it is my pleasure to announce a pilot program at Cornell's College of Agriculture and Life Sciences called the Food Systems Fellowship. This program is designed to take the classroom education and show how it is applied throughout the food system from farm to fork. This will help to create graduates, regardless of where their careers in the system may be, who understand how their part fits in, how to better communicate with others in the system, how to work with supplier partners, retail partners, processing partners to create efficiencies and a more sustainable solution. This training and experience will prepare these young men and women to find new opportunities and new ways of thinking so they can feed our growing global population. Our objectives will be for the students coming out of the program to appreciate the full, complex system. These future leaders should be able to describe the system, the role they play in it, and how they interact with other components of the system. This will provide the foundation for the students to work on solutions by examining what-if scenarios. There are three broad headings under which we envision the training to take place, which will allow the students to follow the food system from farm to fork. These are production, processing, or first handlers, and then the buying activity, be it institutional, wholesale, retail, etc. There is another benefit. Hopefully, it would open their eyes to all the possible career opportunities. I can't think of a company that doesn't list finding the right talent as one of their biggest challenges. Our goal is to create the right talent, to show these bright young women and men all that they can do within this system. From drone technology on the farm, to constant improvements in food safety and quality and processing, to more efficient logistics systems and traceability technology, ways of interacting and telling the story to the consumer, and bringing the product to the shelf or doorstep. The leaders of tomorrow want to solve big problems, and we can show them how to do it. I encourage everybody here that is interested in participating to sign up on our contact sheet in the front foyer. The organizations represented here today are just the ones needed to expose undergraduates to the tools that will solve the complex issues of today and tomorrow. Please sign up to be involved. I was told that we already have our first company to sign up as Cargo. Thank you.
Okay, how do we do this? All right, I'm in a terrible position because I'm between you and wine. And I have to figure out, as the cow guy, how to summarize a bunch of food system people. So usually I get to do this, but I have somebody who we've all been in the same group and we all talk to each other and we all know each other, so this is a little more difficult. So I'm going to try and summarize them real quick. I'll try and have some fun. I'll be a little provocative because I'm going to bring a few things in here. As Mike just said, just received a text message a few hours ago that Cargill's expressed interest in this Global Food System Fellowship, and what it likes is the global nature of the program and the integrated nature of the approach. So these guys are looking at this as a way, as Mike says, to grow talent. As somebody who directs an undergraduate program in animal science in the dairy program, I have kids who come from farms who may not be going back to farms, and I've had this historical nature where there's a lot more, and I'll just speak openly for a minute. We went from about 90% male and 10% female to about 50-50, and the women are starting to outgain the men now. Some of those women are interested in production agriculture, but what they're really interested in is food. And so I've been working hard. This to me is an awesome idea because one of the things that I see is that, I'm not on. I know it, I did it again. There we go. One of the things that I've seen is that to do this effectively, and in the previous speaker, John made the point about silos. Well, academia can be a bunch of silos, and I think if you're going to do this system effectively, we have to break down some of those silos because we're talking about a systems approach, and students have to have a pretty broad training. So I've tried moving in this direction in the past with some of my students, and I'm effective in my own little way, but I'm hoping this gains some speed because I see an opportunity for a lot of students to gain a really broad perspective here. So I got a few examples, but we'll keep moving. So to summarize, and it doesn't help when you see these kinds of things come across your desk, right? Worst jobs of 2013, number 6 is the dairy farmer, right? Because this is a frustration of mine because we are doing a horrible job of promoting agriculture and food production as a career. And I don't know how to change that, but I can tell you that the kids that I run into are like, well, I'm never going to do that because my parents say that's an awful job. I don't think so. So I work hard to get kids to Cornell, and I got a couple coming tomorrow, and I'm going to spend 3-4 hours with them trying to convince them that coming to Cornell is a great thing to talk about, your career in the food industry, whether you're a dairy farmer or not. Okay? So my simple lesson for the day, food in the food systems complex. All right? That shouldn't be any surprise to anybody. But I think what I've learned, and I've enjoyed many of these talks. I don't get to sit in on these kinds of opportunities, but the complexities and opportunities to change the way we think about food and how efficient we can be with all aspects of it. I heard everything from great big data with IBM, and I was thrilled with that. I'm just trying to figure out how I capture that for animals and do it in a way that's cost effective. But everything through the food system needs to be thought of this way. And I know that, in my small part of the world, the dairy industry is changing. We have robotic milking systems now. We have robotic feeding systems. And nobody knows what the heck to do with the data, right? It's yielding terabytes of data from these things daily, and everybody just kind of looks at it and goes, well, she got milk. That's all I need to know. But that's really one of the big struggles is what did we do? And there's a group of us that talk about that. We just don't know how to gain the resources to move, okay? I like this. I stole a couple of your slides because I couldn't get everybody else's. I wanted the IBM. I couldn't get that because that was on her computer, and I wanted Mel's, and his went with his computer. So, what I see here and what I think I got, and I'm just going to do this quickly, is there's a lot of integration. There's a lot of stuff, right? And I think the hard part here is figuring out how to continue to do this, to talk to each other so we all understand our perspectives. And to me, this is partly about perspective and where we're all coming from. And I enjoyed the first speaker's talk this morning when we started talking about grapes, because I said, oh, that spatial data is really fantastic. But again, how do we keep moving in that direction and make use of it? But then we get into, as we move through the day, we talked about food waste, we talked about climate change, and everything with that. One of the biggest things, and somebody said this, is there's belief systems associated with food because it's so personal, right? And that belief system, and that sounds like a religion, and some days I think people have kind of religious experiences around their food, or at least they want to push that onto their food. I'm not quite sure. We won't go that far, but I find it really interesting how the belief system that they seem to have about what they're going to put in their body affects their decision-making process, whether sometimes it's rational or irrational. right? And Mike just alluded to this from the thing that Mel Neschheim had done. You know, it's a big complex system. I work down here for the most part. I'm down in this part of the system, and then I get into this a little bit. I do work out here, but when I do that, it's they don't let me get too far out there because I'm dangerous. But I think that figuring out how to make the loops fit, you know, I like to do some systems modeling. There's not a lot of feedback loops in this thing, right, Chuck? And I know Chuck Nicholson is a tremendous modeler, and we don't have all the feedback loops on this thing. It's got some directional arrows, but it's really not operating as a model. It's just kind of a block and stock. And we need to work harder to figure out how to draw the lines, and we're all in between this. Here's something, these are the kinds of things that drive me crazy, so here's where I'll be a little bit provocative. I'm supposed to talk about the future. This came across my desk the other day. I'm going to talk to NPR tomorrow. It said, and not that I prompted that, new dietary guidelines will not include sustainability goal. How many of you have seen this? Yeah, interesting, right? And what do they put on the damn picture? What picture do they put on there? It's always a cow. Like, the cow's the worst thing for sustainability. Boy, that drives me crazy. That's a personal thing, right? So my bias is coming through. But there's a real interesting story here, right? So I read the whole thing very quickly. I like listening to Allison Aubrey. She's creative. But then I got to and this was a perfect lead-in, and I'm going to go a couple different directions here. So, the Almond Board of California sent NPR its response on Wednesday morning. Almond growers have reduced 33% the amount of water they use per pound of almonds grown in the past 20 years. These days, about 70% of almond orchards use water-efficient micro-irrigation. Sounds very similar to what Nick told us this morning with the grapes. Great. What was really fascinating then was something that I would be closer to. The meat industry has opposed the idea of including sustainability in dietary guidelines. Man, that is something that just drives me crazy. Why are you guys going to go bury your heads? Okay? But this part of it up here, this pointer's not very good, the top part of this was a natural lead-in for somebody like me because the almond growers are the best group in the world for keeping records. And that may sound funny, but if you were to ask somebody how many soy, by the way, where does vegetable oil come from? Yeah, you guys all know soy. If you ask a group of freshmen at Cornell, they're dumbfounded. They'll look at you and go, I don't know. Well, they come from vegetables? Yeah, they come from vegetables. So you educate them as to what vegetable oil really is. It's soy oil. So what do you do with the byproduct of soy oil? We feed it to animals. But we don't grow the soybeans just to feed to animals. We grow the soybeans to crush them for oil, and then we're left with the byproduct that we feed to animals. People have that all backwards, right? It's the oil that we want. That's the same with most of the oil seeds. That's why we do what we do. You got to get rid of the byproduct. Well, everybody in here eats almonds. Yes, no? Everybody loves almonds. They're really healthy, selenium, fiber, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Well, these guys, and by the way, nobody knows how many soy hulls there are in the world. Nobody keeps track of it, right? Why should they? They just feed them to a cow. These guys do. This is a bad picture of soy hulls because it's got all these stems in here, but this is the true hull. This is pectinaceous. It's highly digestible. In 2011 or 12, when we did the study, they produced about 4 billion pounds of almond hulls per year that are currently disposed of through cattle. And they are scared to death that the California dairy industry is going to go away. Because if it goes away, what do they do with 4 billion pounds of almond hulls? That we turn into what? Milk and meat. Good byproduct use, right? But the cows have been recyclers forever. That never makes it into this discussion about the environmental impact of food production if you're talking about a cow. So this is just one particular area that I'm very close to because I keep seeing this, cows are going to destroy the earth. And I'm like, no, I think we got to step back because if you actually look at it, 30 to 40% of the cow's diet is a byproduct of the food chain. And we've done the study, we're working on the paper. That's a big number, right? So when you tell somebody that 40% of what a cow eats is from our food processing or our food waste or wheat that we can't harvest and eat because it got wet and it sprouted before we got to it, right? What do you do with it? You feed it to an animal and make food. Well, that leads to, so this has to fit, these kinds of things are hidden in everything that we're talking about relative to to the day, you know, we were doing food systems, but this is part of the food system. I made the point earlier today, and a couple people asked me this in the hallway, so I said, you know what, I'll just bring the slides in. So there's dairy product contribution to U.S. intake of essential nutrients, and this is ages 2 years and older. So percent of calories and nutrients from dairy, it's about 10%, but notice what percent of the nutrients we get, you know, vitamin D, calcium, vitamin A, we can do all of that. And the question is, should this be included, this type of information be included in the environmental impact, which is what I said earlier, right? 10% of the calories, a heck of a lot of the nutrients. And when we do this, and the reason I'm going to bring this up, this was an awesome paper. This was Sweden. The Swedish government was going to get rid of milk for school kids. Why were they going to get rid of milk for school kids? Because cows are damaging the environment. And they were going to go to soy milk or oat milk. I'm saying milk, it's really drink because it's not milk, right? So what these enterprising folks did, the paper published a few years ago now, 2010, they said, hey, you know what? Let's convert this information to a nutrient density because we make food to feed people, right? And this was my point earlier, and this is what I think everybody should be doing or how you should be thinking about it. So nutrient density about 54, grams of CO2 equivalent per gram of product 99, orange juice. Look at the nutrient density of orange juice. Why do we drink orange juice mostly? Vitamin C, right, which we add back now, maybe some fiber. You can put calcium in it now, okay, but that's not natural. 61 grams, and you see where soy and oat drinks rank? Still have an imprint. We're going to drink red wine in a few minutes. You know, we should all feel bad about the environment while we're enjoying it. Yeah, so you guys are doing better. I know. I'm just taking it as it is. Soda, water, beer. Beer doesn't really, they didn't get that part on the beer either, did they? No, they didn't. I don't know. Yeah. All right, but what they then did is they made an index out of that, right? And what we can do is make an index out of that and look at this ratio, right? And whether you like this idea or not, the point is it gets to a nutrient density per unit of climate impact index, right? And I think this is really helpful because in everything that we're doing, we're worried about the environment, we're worried about nutrients. We make food for people. We make food to meet nutrient requirements. So I think we need to incorporate this kind of thinking into what we're doing. That's my talk about the future because this is how I think we're going to combat this in a way that makes more nutrient sense and not just focus on a particular commodity group and say, well, that doesn't really work because, man, we sure as heck wouldn't be drinking red wine or beer, right? And as John said earlier, we don't waste too many of those things. I'm going to come back to that point, though. All right, so that's enough of my looking forward. Take-home ideas, I like this. Craig, not all farms are the same. I grew up on a farm. That's the one thing I've learned as I've gotten older is that's the beauty of being a farmer, right? You can do it your way, right? Because it's your business. But that's also the hard part of it because not everybody's the same. And I work with farms all around the world, and it's the same all around the world. Everybody has their own way of doing things. His other point about community is important. Well, I think that's true in any sense. I like the way he framed that, but really what it comes down to is food and community kind of go together because of how we look at our relationships. I also like the idea about diversification can be helpful, and there can be synergy in diversification. Sometimes dairies can do that, and sometimes they can't, but in lots of other businesses they can. I got a kick out of this. Energy to grow lettuce in New York makes it prohibitive at the moment. And the transportation, I hear this all the time, is it cost effective to truck stuff from California? And, what these guys just said was yes, and I was so happy to see that because I hadn't seen that before, but I've made the argument because I know how hard it is to heat things around here, right? And we just never have the data. This goes back to where data can be really helpful. But I was thrilled to see that because I'm going to go back to some friends and say, hey, you know what? Let's go drink some wine. That conversation that we had, I was right. It's too expensive. Packaging, and it's not about being right. It's just the idea that these guys want to make an argument about local food, which I'll come back to in a minute. Packaging, this coffee, I do this by the pound. Look what it's done, and we still pay for it, right? And it's crazy because it's like 4 times the cost per pound, but packaging has changed the way we do things. What's really interesting, too, is that you can do things with packaging that change people's perspective, not only this way, but in a negative way. And I had this cartoon. I've done these things in the past, right? We have General Oats cereal, then we have Stay Puft, and then we have Red Farm, and that's asbestos-free, right? Is there anything that says they can't do that? And the answer is no, they can do that, right? But what's it make the consumer believe? That everything else has it. Is this true everywhere? Yeah, this is one of the biggest divisive things I see in the industry. I'm going to come back to this in a minute as far as dairy. But I think packaging is a neat idea. It is part of our food system. I think it gets us into trouble sometimes because we all want to compete. And we leave people believing that there are things that are different when they really aren't. Okay? I love this. You know, I didn't understand this, but once she explained it, I'm like, that's pretty cool. It was really cool, too, that I could buy colostrum like that. Everybody should be drinking colostrum, but that's a whole other discussion. But the idea that there's all these technologies coming that will be cost-effective and change the way we do things, I think is tremendous. And that, to me, is refreshing because sometimes I think we get stuck not innovating, at least on the production side. I don't always see the innovation that I want. So to see innovation on this side really gets me excited because it says there's all these opportunities. All right, other take-home ideas. I love this one. Pay attention to what consumers do, not what they say. Man, that struck me like a hammer this morning because I hear this all the time. Well, everybody says this. Well, what are they actually doing? What's their behavior? Are they not buying milk? Are they not buying meat? Are they not buying certain vegetables? What is it that they do? And that really drives it. This statement, too, really caught me. I love this. Big data will be disruptive. Oh, man, that means there's going to be chaos. You know, we're supposed to be doing all this big data thing to remove the chaos, and it's actually going to create more chaos. But I think it's going to be fun simply because it's going to teach us a bunch of things that we sometimes intuitively think we know, but we don't always know as much as we thought. All right? The Wegmans story, you know, when all else fails, communicate in less than 60 seconds and be completely transparent. Right? But I think this is a really big lesson because how many times do we want to run the other way from something that goes wrong? Right? And that's just human nature. And this is the other part about this thing is that we're all human and we don't want to accept, you know, responsibility sometimes when things go wrong, whether it's our fault or not. But if we're in the food business, we have to, and we have to learn how to be transparent about it. And I don't see this often enough on several different levels, from the production end all the way to the other end. Right? This is kind of playing off a little bit of what Nina said and some other things that I heard. You know, what we want is affordable food, environmentally friendly, hormone and antibiotic-free, whatever that means, safe food, humanely treated animals. Sometimes we want local food. I love this when it came out in the Oxford American Dictionary, word for 2007, locavore, right? And talk to students about that. It's a big word in Ithaca. I don't think it's a big word everywhere else. At least I don't hear it anymore. And what it says, what I learned was broccoli is a good thing locally, milk is not. Okay? I'm sorry, Chuck, but that's what you said, right? We'll go drink beer later. No. Right. But I think the dichotomy, I love that ad, but I think the dichotomy between these things is really interesting because we come back to this local food's got to be better. Well, sometimes maybe and sometimes not. And I think, again, as we get more and more data and we do the types of analyses that the two authors of these talks did, that we'll start to make better decisions and we can have better conversations about it, what it really means. Milk, maybe not. Cheese, I don't know, Chuck, would cheese be better on a local basis? Yogurt, I know somebody asked about Chobani. I don't know. They're shipping it from Idaho. It's the same now as it was before. You know, and then I think we kind of related to this consumer and societal expectations and producer needs. Consumer demands and producer needs are sometimes mutually exclusive, right? And it got back to some of the slight discussion we had about welfare. Sometimes we ask for things with welfare that the consumer's still not quite willing to pay for. Part of this comes down to, and I truly believe this, that sometimes they're just uninformed. And we talked about the fact that they don't know. We were talking about cow-calf separation. They don't really know that we do that, but they're so far away. Well, first of all, our advertising and our marketing cause some of that, and then they're so far away from the production practice, they don't know the difference to begin with. But, and again, the other thing, and this, I don't think this happens in the vegetable business as much as it does in dairy, but this stuff drives me crazy in dairy. So here's Organic Valley. In all due respect, I'm not meaning to put myself a little controversial here now, but I like Organic Valley. I like all milk. I like all dairy, but the labeling drives me crazy, right? Pesticides, hormones, and drugs, oh my, right? Wizard of Oz, Golden. What bothers me is down here are 3 things you'll never find in Organic Valley milk. Is that acceptable? Yet these ads were out there. Well, what does this do? This makes all the consumers believe what? That in every other form of milk, there's pesticides, hormones, and antibiotics, and we know that's not true. All right? So the other thing about everything that we're doing is we have to learn not to do this to each other. All right? This drives me crazy. You know, and I've been kicked out of meetings before when I throw this up there, especially if it's dairy farmers. They start screaming at me. But the bottom line is that I think some of the other things we do is we create misinformation by trying to be competitive, right? And that comes back to the whole food system. Okay? We learned that food delivery is a real tough thing, and that diesel trucks can be bad. And I grew up kind of over in here, so I was right in the middle of all that. And I guess I saw some of that quite a bit because I was in an industrialized area, even though we had a dairy farm. Right, so there's things that, I would have never thought about this relative to food, right? This is one of those unintended consequences. Mike talked about food systems. This is really interesting to me because I think everybody's having a hard time getting their mind wrapped around this. What this really comes back to me is, it comes down to, is going to be land use and land resources and where are we going to grow our food. And I always like to show this. I think we're at risk of some things. You know, the Corn Belt, there was a map that I saw 10, 12 years ago where the Corn Belt was going to shift from basically Illinois all the way up and move towards Alaska. Right, and that's basically what I heard, is that it keeps moving up so many yards a day, right? And that's where they were tipping to. But that means that we're going to grow food where? In places that we've never thought about. And I always show this picture, right? Does that look like good, productive land? Are we all going to grow our food on that land? I love this picture. Where do you think that is? It's Tuscany, right? There's some sheep, and they're over there grazing. Notice this here. What do you see on the side of that hill? Nope, not erosion. It's the trails for the sheep. Because guess who was doing this before the Tuscans started doing it? The Etruscans were there about 5,000 years ago doing the same thing. Okay, so they've been doing that a long time in the same area, except the Italians and the Tuscans have gotten better because what they do is they've got their grapes down here someplace, they got their wheat down on the bottom, and they got their olives just above that, and they got their sheep, and they make lots of pecorino, right? But they do it on what we would call marginal land. As we get more and more of this climate change, we're going to have to ask the question, what is marginal land and how do we make best use of it? Because I think we're going to be asked to use resources that we've never been asked to use before, no matter, what's at stake. Okay, 2 more slides. Take-home ideas. I love the last talk. So now I have a question, John. And this is for the group, because I was asking the guys in the back. Okay, I'm 54 years old as of a week ago. And when I was young and going grocery shopping with my mother and grandmother, right, because I couldn't stay home, couldn't be trusted to stay home. Between October and April, did anybody find a fresh strawberry in the grocery store? And so there's youngsters in here who ain't going to know the answer to that question, but the answer is no. Did you find any green leafy vegetable? No. Yeah, maybe cabbage, because that's pretty sustainable and sulfury, right? Well, so I was listening to John's talk. So there's a question. Have we created, and I'm doing this again to be a little bit provocative, because I asked this question in one of the classes that I teach. Have we created the problem? Because we made everybody believe that we could deliver all this stuff to the grocery store 365 days a year, right? I remember going to Italy for the first time. My wife is Italian, by the way, so I'll disclose that. But I'm going to Italy. I take student groups over there. I'm over there with the students, and the students are going, why aren't we eating any fresh vegetables? And we're in January. I said, because there aren't any. And they said, well, where are the fresh vegetables? I said, what's on the ground right now, guys? Well, it's snow. Well, why does that have anything to do with it? Right? And I said, because Italians don't eat out of cycle. They eat in cycle, right? So they're eating vegetables that they preserved or salted or put in olive oil, months ago. But they're eating differently in January than they will be in July. And I keep asking this whole, so for the food waste thing, are we creating that problem by putting this expectation out there that all these fresh vegetables and fruits should be there in January? Did we do that as food people? And I'm only asking that question because I didn't see it when I was growing up, and now I see it, but now we complain that we're losing so much of it. Now, if we can fix it, I'm great with that, and do it cost effectively, fantastic. But it's one of those things where I keep wondering, how did we get here, right? So, one last slide. Again, this goes back to Mel Neschheim. All I'll say to summary is, if you guys haven't looked at it, I've skimmed the report now. Everything that we talked about today, all the buzzwords that I heard, the IBM talk, all that's in there. It's really fascinating to me that they were able to capture everything that we talked about today in that document. So all I'll say is we would all do ourselves a favor and by downloading that and reading it, and that's the best way I know how to summarize. That'll stop.